I mean, I'm for abolishing it, and I think it should be taken out because I don't think it's going to solve any problems.
To the point where we know the culprit's intention.
Itu pun state tak boleh nak bagi 1 million.
Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Headlines. My name is Amalina Kamal, your host for this later round of Information Digest. Now we're going to give you a little bit of update on crime, courts and sports. Now first up, the death sentences for the murderers of cosmetic millionaire Altantuya-Sosilawati have been upheld by the High Court despite the convicts' applications to have their punishment commuted under the new Mandatory Death Penalty Abolition Act 2023. Now in a unanimous decision, the Federal Court, led by Chief Justice Tuanku Tuan Mat, upheld the death sentence. She stated, and I quote, "In exercising our judicial discretion and having regard the facts on substance of this case, we dismiss the application. Thus, the sentence is maintained." So what does this ruling mean for other high-profile cases where convicts are seeking to have their death sentences commuted? And how might this impact future judicial discretion, especially in cases involving heinous crimes? Now for this, we have our very special guest and criminal lawyer, Srikanth Pillai, on set. Welcome, Srikanth, to Beyond the Headlines.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you. Now, of course, in this particular episode, we will also be switching gears to the Petronas-led Tour de Langkawi, LTdL, and the frustration voiced by our Youth and Sports Minister, Hannah Yeoh, calling the state governments for their lack of financial backing. And of course, for this particular round, we will have sports expert Dr. Pekan Ramli joining us on set. Welcome, Dr. Pekan, to Beyond the Headlines.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's good to see you again here on set.
This is my second time.
Second time. First it was for the Olympics and now a more, I suppose, localized event, but of international standards.
Yeah.
But before we get into this particular discussion with you, right, we want to talk about the mandatory death penalty, basically the abolition here. And of course, with the recent developments, right, with the federal court upholding the death sentence of Altantuya-Sosilawati case, despite the abolition of mandatory death penalty here. Srikanth, what do you believe this signals for similar high-profile cases?
Okay, so before I answer that question, we need to look at a larger picture a little bit. Okay, since this act came into play, there have been, I think, if I'm not wrong, about 1,000 over applications for review for that penalty, which has been filed in the court. And up to now, I think almost all have been heard. I think they've got a bit of maybe 20 or more to be heard, which ends in October 29.
Okay.
So if you look at the larger picture of all those 1,000 over that's been heard, from what I know and what I gather from information that I know, only 30 have been
commuted,
upheld.
I see.
That sentence has been upheld.
Okay.
So you're looking at about 1% of the amount of people that's sitting in that row made that application. So if you look at it in the large sense, actually they are a bit more cautious in sentencing somebody to death.
Okay.
Putting aside Sosilawati's case, Altantuya-Sosilawati's case, I mean, looking in a general sense, mostly the ones that have got that penalty are murder cases. So we are looking at it on that sense. So they are looking at how, on brutality, they're looking at how heinous the crime is. And when you say high profile, it could be two things. It could be high profile in the sense that it's publicly known, or it could be high profile that the person is high profile. So you can't just say high profile, but I think they look at basically the brutality of the case more than anything else. So I would think how they are going to look at cases of like Sosilawati cases would be on how brutal it is, how heinous the crime is.
Right. But in the case of Altantuya-Sosilawati's case, the former lawyer had, I suppose, past cases linked to him. Do you think that was part of the, I suppose, reason or rationale why the decision was upheld?
Well, to be fair, I can't comment on that, to be fair, because I think the courts don't really look into the facts of the case, meaning they don't really go into the facts. They go more on the mitigation circumstances. But when I say they don't go into the facts, they do look at the brutality of it. So I wouldn't know whether they took that into consideration because we don't know whether that was highlighted. As far as I know, and I was there in court when this particular case was going on, but that part of it was not really heard, really. So mainly, it's all about mitigation.
Right. But I suppose other similar cases in having to whether or not commute under this particular act.
Okay.
And how viable is it?
Well, among a few cases that has been heard before, also murder cases, that means life been taken away, the courts have actually given, they do have an option to give 30 to 40 years and whipping of 12 strokes of whip if you are below 50. So there have been instances where other murder cases where the applicants would have got 32 years or 35 years, or maybe even 30 or 40 years, depending on how crazy the crime is. Like, for instance, I think today, Azila's case, Altantuya's case, right? So he got 40 years. So they have that discretion. So I think it's based on a lot of things. It's based on public interest. It's based on victims' families. How are they going to feel about it? I think to say across the board that every murder case is going to be difficult it won't be like that. I think it would be based on a case-to-case basis. I don't think it's going to be, paint with a large broad brush and say all murder cases are going to get that penalty. It's going to be yeah, it won't be that way. It's not how it seems, because I know they do have a little bit of discretion. They do give 32 years, depending.
Yeah, before we go into the judicial discussion or the considerations behind it, I just want to update because you did point it out about Azila Hadri. So former cop Azila Hadri escaped the gallows after the federal court commuted his death sentence to 40 years imprisonment as well as 12 strokes of the cane for murdering Mongolian model Altantuya-Sosilawati in 2006. Now, this particular decision was made unanimously, of course, by a 3-member federal court bench led by Chief Justice Tuanku Tuan Mat. Now, I mean, I suppose this gives us another picture of how,
exactly.
An application is being reviewed under this particular act. Okay, so when we want to go into the judicial discretion, especially in particular of heinous crimes here, right? The 2023 Act, it allows courts more discretion when it comes to sentencing. Now, given that the judges choose to uphold the death sentences for one type of case, how do you think this judicial discretion will be, exercised in future cases?
Personally, I think it's on a case-to-case basis.
Again,
it has to be, because that's how you exercise your discretion. You can't just exercise it just on one case. Okay, so it all depends on brutality of the cases and how heinous it is. I think they're going to give that that particular standard. So it will all depend on case-to-case basis based on that. So I would believe that whether they will use it for only, I think they'll save it for those kinds of cases. But how violent, how brutal, it depends on a case-to-case basis.
Right, okay. But then again, the question goes to how then would the lawyers representing those on death row need to strategize in appealing these cases? Well,
they can't go back to the facts, that's for sure, because that's where, I mean, you can go to the facts, but because that has already been decided based on the facts. So we are going on mitigation circumstances, right? So to see whether he has changed or whether he has a chance of being a better person in prison, mental health issues, any sort of ailments or that he's being treated for, those kind of mitigating factors. His age is a mitigating factor, how long he's been in prison. I think all that play a role. And if there are people, and if he has really improved, and there is statements to say that he's been a model prisoner or something like that, that would probably help him more on trying to, that mitigating circumstances would probably help him more. You know?
But do you think certain cases might be impacted by the public and victim impact statements, and like how fair is it when it's done in such a way, right? It's reviewed in such a way.
I think the balance that the judges would have to look at, they have to come up with the balance, family of the victims, then you got to look at human rights, you got to look at morality, you got to look at justice at the same time. So it's a scale that they need to balance, and it's not so. I wouldn't say it's an easy task. I think it's quite difficult. So of course, the victims' families' stories are going to be very strong, you know, and that will also, of course, impact what the judges would feel, and societal, you know, what the society is going to say, the expectations of society, all that would come into this, right? So it is very difficult to actually come up with a balance to say which should go to prison and which should be sentenced to death, who should be sentenced and who should go to prison. It's hard.
But then is it up to the lawyer
it's
to
up
make
to the
a
lawyer
good-
to make the, but it's also up to the judge to actually put all this together and have a look at it and see which is the most brutal, the rarest of the rare, they call it. You know, I think that's the task that the judiciary has
Right.
in their hand before application for this.
I mean, the only reason why I highlighted about public and victim impact statements here, because of course, in the case of Datuk Sosilawati, the timeline of Datuk Sosilawati's death, or at least the chronology of the murder, was, you know, aired everywhere. Do you think that in such cases, it's already rigged from the beginning? Even by, let's say, if you were to appeal,
Yeah.
you already know the answer, you already know the verdict.
Okay.
I suppose, what's the responsibility of having to ensure that these people have fair opportunities to go for an appeal?
The most important is the trial, really, because the trial is when you set up and be prepared for appeal. So that's where all your evidence has to be in there. So whatever the defense counsel has to do has to be done at the trial stage, and has to be putting up the best defense he can for that accused. So from there is when the appeal happens. So you've got unless you've got you've got an application of putting in fresh evidence, which is very, very difficult to do. It starts at the trial stage. So the appeal will be based on what happened in the trial. So then it all depends on the facts, the evidence that comes through at the lower court, the cross-examination done by the defense counsel. All that make a difference in the appeal, right? So that's the process. So, I mean, if the case is really bad facts, it's really bad facts. And there are cases with bad facts where lawyers have won based on technicalities, and some because of the law that's on their side. So those are things that happen as and when a trial goes on.
Right.
So it's something that sometimes you can't control, sometimes you know, you have a plan, you have a strategy, and you go for it. So that's how it works.
So for this particular case, right, so the review has been rejected in a way, the court has upheld the sentence.
Yes.
Will there be any more chances for a review or
Well,
an
this is the
appeal?
end.
This is the
This
end.
is the end of the line, because this is the final review that the court will listen to under this particular act. Any other review based on something else, I mean, I'm sure if they want to, I'm sure they can try and file in a review on that. But on this issue, I think this is it.
Okay.
This is the end.
I mean, okay. Let's move on to our next, I suppose, area of concern here. Challenges in applying the new act. Do you see for the judiciary there will be some sort of hiccup in determining when to apply one over the other?
I don't think it all depends on the facts. That's all I can say. So if you have another case comes before the judge's duty is to look at the facts and then base his decision on those particular facts in front of him. So there's going to be another case with a different set of facts. It's up to him to decide whether he wants to use that discretion or not. That's how I look at it, you know.
Okay.
So especially for cases of murder, how brutal a case is and how violent a crime is. So that would mean how bad the facts are.
Right. And at least for Azila's case, well, the Chief Justice did say when reading the judgment, apparently as far as the impact on the victim's family, we have a letter from the victim's father. He has also asked to mitigate the death sentence to life imprisonment.
Okay, so that's the reason. So that of course, you know, the court will take into account that, saying that there's some closure in the family side and, you know, there's no point putting him to death and it's giving 40 years.
Moving away from the mandatory death penalty, it is a big step for Malaysia, right? But how can we uphold this, especially when it comes to looking at it from a human rights sort of lens?
I think we took a long time to get where we are now, and I think with a lot of pressure, but I won't say pressure, but a lot of fighting from certain NGOs about capital punishment and the general world overview of the abolition being a criteria in most countries, right? I think this is a big step, and I'll take it because, you know, it's coming to a point where it's become discretionary now, which is a good thing already. Taking away mandatory, you know, it's a large step that Malaysia has taken. And I think going towards a full abolition is going to take a bit of time. But I think eventually, I think we'll get there. It'll take a while. I think there's a lot of studying and research going on, which I think.
But what about public sentiments here? Because I sometimes you see arguments that they would want a death penalty for something that is very heinous. There are still sentiments like that, even though we do have this particular act today. Yeah. How do we address this though? How do we look at it from a point of view that is forward-looking?
Okay, so as long as there's capital punishment in this country, I think we are moving towards the trend of keeping it for heinous and brutal crimes. I mean, it looks that way. I could be wrong, but it looks that way. It looks like that's where it's going, right? It is, if you completely abolish it, I mean, I'm for abolishing it completely. That's just me. It's my opinion. And I think it should be taken out because I don't think it's going to solve any problems. I don't think there's having the capital punishment is going to deter somebody from doing something because the crimes are still being committed in any way, whether the punishment is there or not. So in the long run, I feel it's the best thing to do is to completely take it out of the charts and just keep it as life imprisonment and move on from there. I think that's where eventually we should be going. But
is our prison system within that capacity though to handle?
That's where the reforms have to come in, right? So if you're going to do something like this, the reforms have to come in together. It's not something that you just get rid of and don't think about the reforms. If you're going to do something like this, then the reforms of prisons got to be, reforms got to happen anyway. Whether you're going to in prison, it has to happen anyway, whether they're going to take away the capital punishment or not. So I think it works hand in hand. Everything has to work. We need to evolve. So we're evolving as, towards a developed nation. And I think evolving prison systems and evolving this law is a step forward. Whatever it is a step forward.
Because our prison is not necessarily the most visible, right? Like a lot of people don't necessarily understand how bad it is when it comes to the detention, especially in the capacity and everything. Do you have some sort of suggestions or improvements in terms of where the government can look into, especially to ensure that there is longevity, at least when it comes to upholding this act and translating it across?
I think the reforms when it comes to prison is, of course, so many things, right? I'm not an expert in that part of it, but me going to prison, being going to visit my clients and so on. There are so many things on cleanliness. Maybe I wouldn't know personally, right? I've not been into prison, incarcerated or anything, but mainly on probably sanitary wise, whether they'll get more medical treatment. That is one of the complaints that I get from my clients, that they're not getting enough medical treatment, they're not being taken to the hospital enough. There are those issues that pop up. So then we have to keep making applications for, to go to the doctor and so on and so forth. So reforms in terms of space, maybe bigger prison, bigger cells, all that would have to come into play. If you're going to do something like reform capital punishment and go on life imprisonment, that would be one of it. But I'm just talking about the surface because I have not really done
right. No, I'm just organically expanding this discussion because, of course, we can't talk about one thing and then without talking about the other. And then, I suppose to end this particular segment, what do you think about rehabilitation instead of punitive actions then?
Yeah, of course, that's a positive. If the person can rehabilitate in terms of having proper a mental health program or psychiatrists to these people who, to prisoners who need them, because I think there are a lot of them having all kinds of depression issues and mental anguish and mental illnesses.
But for those who are specifically on death row for heinous crimes such as killing or murdering here, they are, I suppose they are entitled to have that same sort of right.
I think so, and I think that will help them in getting commuted to a life imprisonment if they've actually had some sort of they've taken some steps to get themselves better or rehabilitate or be a better person. I think that would really help. So the rehab programs, I don't know what they have in prison for rehab. I don't know what programs they have, but you know that would probably help the prisoners and people in that row get in a better place in terms of mentally, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for this particular discussion. I just want to check with you if you have one last thing that you want to highlight across to our audience, at least, that you want to put forth, especially when it comes to this particular act that not necessarily a lot of people might know.
I think for this particular act and on the review applications have gone so far, I think what the courts have done so far, to me, I feel they've been very cautious in how they want to send someone to death. And I think that is something a lot of people don't know, because you look at the big picture, you look at a big case, and they go like, "Oh, the courts are really hammering it in." That's the question you asked me, right? Actually, I think they've been quite careful and cautious in how they use that discretion. So I think they're leaving it for really heinous crimes, and I think people should know that.
Right. Now, before we segue into our second topic of interest, I just want to cue to my co-host, Hazwin Hassan, who is on ground at the Warna International Art Festival here in Kuala Lumpur.
It was an international and regal affair at the Harta Space Gallery here in Ampang. Her Royal Highness Raja Permaisuri of Perak, Tuanku Zara Salim, graced the Warna International Art Exhibition, showcasing the work of 20 international and local female artists. The main takeaway from it all was about empowering women and giving a voice to the oppressed. Themed Exploring Spaces Beyond Boundaries, the occasion lent itself as a platform for these women in arts to tell their stories and personal journeys. For Samin from Iran, who came to represent her mother, Neda, a featured artist in the exhibition, Islam takes a central theme in her painting, Mothers of Palestine.
About your mother, her background, and maybe why she couldn't make it today?
Yeah, my mother have been studying in arts. She got her PhD in Islamic arts from University Malaya.
Oh, okay.
And we've been living in Malaysia for 15 years. And she's been doing illustration, miniature, and has hip since she was young. In her teenage years, she started. And these are some of her works that I'm representing instead of her. Thank you. Thank you.
Is there a reason why she couldn't make it today?
Unfortunately, because of the visa renewal, she couldn't make it, and everything going on in the Middle East right now, she couldn't make it today.
Oh, that's
yeah.
So can you tell me, like, because you told me that she started in her teenage years, did something inspire her to start, or was it like more of her family background or something?
My grandmother actually always tried to make her children to go into arts, in different types of arts. And since that age, she loved art and paintings, and that's why she went, and she kind of like went into it. And then she continued because she really enjoyed it.
Painting? Yeah. That is a miniature painting, right, you said?
Yes,
How
it's
long
a
did it take for your mother to complete it?
I think it got around like 1 month.
1 month?
Yeah,
okay.
approximately in
it's
a
very
moment.
detailed.
Yes, it is. This one also, I do have an explanation about it. The painting Mother of Palestine uses the Safaviya style miniature. Safaviya is one of the ancient types of paintings in Iran. And along with some symbols to show a part of the Islamic world, namely Palestine and its current situation. The woman in the white cloth over here, which in the Islamic world symbolizes a burial shroud, and in Iranian painting represents light. Is a symbol of divine power and light rising from Jerusalem. It also shows the current strength of Palestinian mothers who, despite the state of their homeland, continues to powerfully defend their children, symbolizing not just motherhood for their children, but their homeland.
Yes, I see.
Yeah.
We can say that there's a link between empowering women in Palestine as well as actually incorporating it in our art, like your mother did so
Yes,
as well. Yes,
exactly.
I can see. It's very, especially during these times.
Yeah.
Among the distinguished guests included Brazilian Ambassador Ari Norton de Murat Quintela. Next month, Prime Minister Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim will visit Brazil for the G20 summit, following a special invitation from President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Brazil, Malaysia's second largest trading partner in Latin America, extended the invitation as the host nation, despite Malaysia not being a G20 member. Key discussions between Anwar and Lula will focus on social inclusion, combating hunger and poverty, energy transition, sustainable development, and reforming global governance. Lula also praised Anwar for making Malaysia a strong voice in championing the Palestinian cause, particularly on the Gaza conflict. You brought up Gaza just now. So Anwar, definitely, he has been the singular voice, I would say, not just in the world, but even in terms of representing a voice, a Muslim voice. He's been very, very outspoken. In fact, Jordan recently named him the 15th most influential Muslim, right, globally, out of 500, the top 500. So he's number 15. So when he goes to Brazil for this visit, and as you put it, it's a special invite because you have that privilege as a host for the G20 summit. Is Gaza going to be one of the key things that you're going to highlight? That Brazil is with Malaysia, that you take the same stance as what Anwar has been saying all this while?
Possibly, because I agree that Anwar Ibrahim has been very vocal about Gaza, and rightly so, but President Lula too. And in Brazil, in Malaysia, there's unanimity about it, about Gaza, not in Brazil. Brazil is a very large country, and there is some opposition to Lula's stance on Gaza in Brazil. So it's very brave on the part of President Lula to speak out about Gaza, as there is sometimes opposition, including from the press, about what he says about Gaza. So definitely, that's one of the things the two leaders can talk about. But you must remember that in the last 2 years, maybe 3 years, especially since President Lula became president again and Anwar Ibrahim became prime minister, they coincided because Lula became president in January 2023. And so much has been done between the two countries in the field of the environment and climate change, in the field of semiconductors, in the field of renewable energies. So definitely they will talk about Gaza when they meet in November in Rio. But there are several subjects which are more closely related to the bilateral relations between Brazil and Malaysia.
So Gaza high on the agenda, you would say? Not so much, but...
Gaza, I believe, is when two leaders in the world meet nowadays. Right. Gaza is always a topic in the agenda.
For Benedetta Segala, an Italian artist who has called Malaysia home for the last 10 years, her gender does not define her artwork.
Because the theme today is breaking boundaries as a woman and empowering women. So how does this painting reflect that, through the fire and the symbolism of it?
Okay, this beautiful exhibition was around this concept of seeing many facets of different talented women, how they express themselves, and to see the diversity and different approach, different. So I think I don't like so much the stereotype. So I am a woman.
So you don't want to box yourself
an artist.
In that.
So
yeah.
I think this is the essential. So, and we need to get out from stereotype and to just look at the work, woman or man, to look at the work at the same level okay. Because it comes from the same source, basically. So what I would say is just explore behind the stereotype. Because in an exhibition with a lot of women, I am a woman, so it's just perfect. I just bring myself, my journey, my work, my way of being. And
so you hope the general public also doesn't confine women in one box.
No.
This is because it's a woman, I have to support it, or it's a man, I have to support it. It's because it's a person.
We need to go beyond that.
Yeah.
Is the objective of this exhibition to show exactly the equality. Because for other reason, politically or other type of reason, it's maybe not been like this even in the West. It's the same thing. But we should go beyond that and just see straight at the work, straight at the essence, at the message of what people have to say.
Yeah.
regardless of the sex of the person,
Yes.
of a gender.
And for the exhibition's curator, Datuk Halimah Muhammad Said, organising an exhibition like this gives her more freedom to share her own work, as well as putting the spotlight on other fellow women artists.
Think about, nowadays there's sort of like men cliques in art, and women are always viewed as, when we do art, it's like a hobby and we are socialites. So have you ever been discriminated like that?
I've never been invited to participate in any exhibition. I organize my own exhibitions and invite people. I don't know why. I've never been invited. I don't think I'm a bad artist.
You're definitely not. Yeah.
But, men's groups, they have their favorites. Even galleries, they have their favorites and they invite the same people, So I do think that, women need better guidance and mentorship and things like that. Of course, some women have made it big.
Yes.
Some women have made it big, but there are a lot of artists out there. There are lots of artists these days, each claiming their own space. So why don't we form a collective space? In fact, if you look at the catalogue, behind there's a logo for Warna, Women in Art for the Nation. That's something that I want to register as a movement.
Oh, wow.
All right? And then we can take it up from there or take it on from there and do other things, But mainly, prioritizing women artists and their works.
So basically, Warna is all about empowering women in art and
yes.
basically helping us break the stereotype that we're just doing this for fun and it's not something that's serious.
Oh, I didn't like that because
Yeah.
I was described as such. Oh, you're a socialite artist. I said, what do you mean? I do attend social functions and all that, but I was an academician. I was my basic degree was English literature, English. And then I taught at the University of Malaya for 25 years. So I'm not a half-baked, whatever, thinker. And I have deep thoughts about things. So I said, it so happens I'm retired now. So you say that, I'm painting as a hobby, but I do it seriously. Like, I calculated my worth, at a summit, at a women's summit. I said, people might not want to look at art as a profession, but I'm trying to tell you that I paint 3 hours a day, and out of 3 hours, so I have like how many other hours to do other things.
Yeah.
So if I manage to sell my painting at say $5,000, so I'm worth that much, for the 3 hours that I spend.
Yeah.
So I calculated my worth. I am worth about $500 an hour in terms of my artistic skills. But that excludes the other works that I do. I also write books and publish books and so on. So it's not something to laugh about, this hobby thing, that you're not a professional and so on. So I didn't like that label. So I'm trying. Somebody that I wanted to be here today is not here. He used that label. He said, women, they're socialites and hobby artists and so on. Whereas it seems men, when they are artists, they're serious about it because they need the income.
As if women don't need the income as well.
They are professional, they're working for a living. But you see, you want to encourage women who don't have jobs to look at art as a profession.
As an outlet.
Yeah.
The exhibition will continue until October 19th at the Hatta Space Art Gallery in Ampang. Visitors can enjoy free admission every day except Monday, October 14th from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. I am Hazwin Hassan along with Amisha Shahira Azman, and this has been a Beyond the Headlines special report.
We want to move on to our next topic of discussion, but of course, Rikan, feel free to stay here if you have any
I'll
questions.
Stay and I could learn something.
Yes, and then if you have any sort of question, you can chime
Thank
in.
you.
Now, the Sports and Youth Minister, Hannah Yeoh, emphasised that the economic benefits of the LTdL, especially for areas the race passes through, has been very much significant, yet states remain reluctant to sponsor the event. Of course, Datuk Pekan, we want to ask you here, why is that so? Why do you think the state government is hesitant, and are they right to be so?
I think this is not a new issue, actually. If you look into when we have an event manager to organize this event. Proper event manager, first cartel. If you remember that when we started hosting this Tour de Langkawi, it was 1996. Waktu tu kita ada first cartel. It's one of the professional company as an event manager. Pada waktu tu pun, mereka juga minta supaya semua state at least menyumbang 1 million untuk orang kata menjadi host kepada stages tu lah, beberapa peringkat perlombaan. Itu pun susah nak dapat. Pada waktu itu kita baru we are just started to run the event. Waktu tu orang semua tengah gairah, semua tengah excited untuk menanti kehadiran Tour de Langkawi. Itu pun state tak boleh nak bagi 1 million pada waktu tu. Apatah lagi sekarang dalam keadaan Tour de Langkawi yang orang kata banyak isu dan few kontroversi yang berlaku after first cartel complete dia punya task last saya ingat dalam 2004 atau 2005 lepas tu kita dah start ada isu yang hadiah isu wang tunai yang tidak diterima oleh pasukan yang telah menyertai.
Is it still a problem today?
I think last problem is 2023 2023 dulu masih lagi ada isu, tapi saya rasa telah pun diselesaikan. Itu sebabnya kita dapat continue with 2024 punya tour. This is a things that yang kadang-kadang mungkin ia menjadi satu perkara yang menyebabkan the passion tu kepada state tu tak adalah menurun. Kita nampak sekarang ni kegarahan untuk menjadi part of the sponsor tu menurun. Dan juga we also have to look into priority. Which one priority yang menjadi keutamaan kepada negeri sekarang ni, state.
Right.
If you talking about sport, cakap berkenaan dengan sukan, semua orang nampak semua negeri berhati-hati dengan keadaan. You nak bagi duit millions to sport, nanti banyak perkara-perkara lain yang akan di-highlightkan oleh especially netizen.
So it's not necessarily an issue of the sports not wanting to participate because they are just, there's a lack of interest. It's more of whether first is the track record. LTdL probably in the past maybe it had some sort of like experience of not necessarily being organized properly, right? And then second is like state has other I suppose priorities to think about, and whether or not they have even the bandwidth to support such an event, right? And when it comes to economic viability, when they invest, they of course want something in return. Do you think there is a lack of confidence when it comes to LTdL or at least international events of the day? If you look into some of the state, I think they really know that most of the race sometimes they only bypass to the state. Jadi dia nampak bahawa benda ni tidak memberikan cukup benefit kepada setiap negeri itulah. You spend, like for example, if you have to contribute 1 million, tapi just Tour de Langkawi itu ataupun the group of cycling to riders itu cuma lalu sekejap aja. Jadi tidak menunjukkan ataupun tidak menonjolkan bahawa enough benefit yang akan diterima oleh setiap negeri itu. Jadi ini beberapa perkara. Contohnya macam Negeri Sembilan dulu pernah meminta supaya satu stage itu betul-betul diadakan di Negeri Sembilan. Tetapi mereka cuma ada 500,000 saja. Jadi Negeri Sembilan dengan 500,000 ada, mereka hanya menerima satu race yang sampai di Port Dickson saja. Jadi ini benda-benda perkara-perkara yang di peringkat kita katakan di peringkat sesebuah negeri itu mereka perlu melihat is there enough benefit for them ataupun dia lebih kepada to attract orang kata in terms of sport tourism kepada setiap negeri itu, which is benda yang belum orang kata belum menjanjikan sesuatu pulangan yang betul-betul orang kata mendapat pulangan yang betul lah kepada setiap negeri. Kita tak tahu kan tambah lagi dalam keadaan sekarang. Kalau dulu ada live telecast yang dibawa kita katakan live
di saluran sukan. Tetapi sekarang ni kita pun tak tahu ni tiba-tiba Tour de Langkawi bila dia mula, tahu dah habis je sekarang. That is the thing yang kita kena tengok balik semula lah, in terms of kata publicity and promotions, in terms of hype up with the events, build up with the events. Kita nampak macam sekarang ni because of tak adanya satu event manager yang betul-betul proper event manager, professional event manager. Event ini di-run by kita punya government agency. Jadi nampak benda ni is very lack lah.
But for this particular upcoming LTdL here, do you at least see some sort of positives when it comes to the, I suppose, hype surrounding it?
So frankly speaking, saya sendiri pun tertanya juga bila habis. Baru dapat tahu semalam, dah habis dah di mana, di Bintulu kan. Jadi ini antara benda yang kita perlu lihat kembali lah. Kalau dulu kita tahu the build up of the events, hype up with the events akan bermula sepanjang tahun, with the soft launchings and then with the a few side event yang akan berlangsung. Tetapi sekarang nampak, ialah mungkin that is the problem yang berlaku ataupun masalah-masalah dari segi penganjuran as a professional event, event-event peringkat antarabangsa, international event yang sepatutnya kita anjur dengan standard antarabangsa juga. Tetapi yang berlaku sekarang ni kita nampak macam kita terpaksa buat, kita kena buat, we have to continue with the event, tetapi dari segi cara kita menguruskan itu tidak nampak seperti yang sepatutnya lah.
So do you think the federal government or at least private sponsors should continue this legacy?
Yes, saya setuju tu sebab saya rasa kita memang memerlukan
LTdL.
Kita memang memerlukan LTdL. How many event, international event we are having in Malaysia? Tak ada pun, tak nampak pun berapa event. Kita cerita tentang bola sepak je sekarang kan. Tapi event-event antarabangsa ni perlu untuk kita katakan to attract people, to know about Malaysia. Of course lah kita sekarang ni kita tengok another thing yang kita kena sekarang ni, state yang kita lihat negeri-negeri tidak sebenarnya mengharapkan acara sukan ini ataupun publicity ataupun promosi yang diterima melalui penganjuran acara sukan ini memberikan benefit kepada state. Sebabnya kalau kita tengok zaman social media hari ini, kita orang viral kan aja apa-apa yang ada di negara kita, di setiap negeri itu. Nak pergi bercamping ke, nak pergi tourism dekat mana-mana ke, nak pergi berkelah dekat mana-mana, nak pergi melancong mana-mana pun sekarang dah tak perlu dah kita keluarkan, we are spending too much money untuk publicity and promotion sebab because of the social media. That's why there are banyak platform yang boleh digunakan tanpa perlu mengharapkan kepada mereka contribute ataupun mereka invest dalam penganjuran acara sukan. Ini antara benda-benda yang perlu kita tengok jugalah.
Okay. We're talking about like the organisation of one event, right? But we want to talk about the state sort of buy-in when it comes to sports. Do you have any sort of visibility in the allocations that each state get when it comes to funding for sports? Is it enough to push for wanting to play sports, wanting to see sports as a longevity when it comes to pursuing any like their career, professional development basically?
Depends pada state. Kalau kita tengok sekarang bergantung kepada negeri. Kalau kita lihat sekarang negeri mana yang serius untuk membangunkan sukan, untuk menggalakkan rakyatnya bersukan sekarang, dan mereka are willing to invest more money in sport. Apa yang berlaku sekarang kita nampak negeri Sarawak. Contohnya sekarang ni kita tengok Sarawak menjadi tuan rumah SUKMA, dan kemudian they also offer to the government to be a next host for SEA Games. They are willing to spend more money because they want the people, they want Sabah, rakyat Sabah melihat sukan ini sebagai satu kerjaya, dan sukan ini juga akan memberikan banyak benefit, dan sukan ini juga akan menarik pelancong-pelancong daripada luar negeri datang ke Sarawak melihat negeri tersebut. Jadi bergantung. Ada setengah negeri langsung tidak merasakan bahawa sukan ini memberi banyak benefit kepada rakyat mereka ataupun kepada ahli-ahli sukan yang ada negeri mereka. Mereka hanya concentrate kepada sukan-sukan yang they are preparing dia punya atlet untuk SUKMA, Tetapi untuk menjadikan sukan sebagai satu kata-kata bukan saja gaya hidup yang sihat, tetapi juga sukan yang dapat mengurangkan kos dari segi kita terpaksa spending untuk penyakit dan sebagainya, tak ada. Jadi perkara-perkara ni yang banyak negeri sekarang dah lack lah. It's very lack.
So how can we balance this? How can the ministry at least foster this sort of balance to have both the sporting competitiveness and the other side of it when it comes to sporting events, of course, the tourism aspect, right, the commercial aspect. How do we balance this? Because obviously, if you look at everything in dollars and cents, you're never going to bring up, the I suppose kemerahan sports of Malaysian athletes here, right? So how do we foster this sort of synergy?
That's right. Actually, if you look into, kita ambil contoh Tour de Langkawi lah. Saya melihat peranan ni perlu dimainkan oleh setiap negeri. Dia ada dia punya esko sukan dan kebudayaan dan sebagainya. Jadi peranan esko sukan dan kebudayaan ini juga sangat penting untuk merancang takwim sukan di setiap negeri. Di mana bila kita merancang takwim sukan tersebut yang membabitkan semua, bukan saja kita nak merancang penyertaan di SUKMA, tetapi juga aktiviti yang berkaitan dengan sukan yang dikaitkan dengan kesihatan, sukan yang dikaitkan dengan perpaduan dan sebagainya. Tetapi this the thing tak yang kita nampak bila di peringkat negeri tu, benda ni nampak macam tidak berlaku sangat lah.
Right. Because I find it very funny because, okay, when we talk about sporting or any sort of sport topics, right, on a national level, suddenly Malaysians, they don't necessarily value fitness or value sports. But when you look when you go on the day-to-day, let's say you look at our courts, I'm just highlighting, now there's a trend on pickleball or paddle or something like that. It's until it's so hard for you to actually get a booking. So on the ground level, it's very detached from what we're experiencing, and people are taking up cycling, as a competitive sport, but they see it as something to just engage as a new hobby. So is our approach wrong from the get-go?
That is our problem, because kita ni bukan ramai sangat orang yang involved with sport. Tapi the problem with us ialah kita ni selalu orang kata hangat-hangat di ayam. Apa kita kata macam bila ada sukan baru je semua orang nak sibuk dengan sukan tersebut. Kalau pada waktu tu kita ada demam basikal, semua orang nak kayuh basikal. Tapi lama-lama basikal simpan di rumah. Beli basikal baru simpan di rumah. Tak ada lagi tengok orang. Dulu kita buat gelanggang futsal, beribu-ribu gelanggang futsal, gelanggang rakyat dan sebagainya. Akhirnya gelanggang futsal pun kosong. Kita buat gelanggang badminton, peringkat awal sebab nak suruh orang main badminton. Akhirnya gelanggang badminton kita pun tak ada orang nak main. Sama sukan baru. Memang kita tak hairan lah. Apa tadi sukan apa?
Paddleball,
pickleball lah semua kan. Semua orang nak cuba peringkat baru semua orang nak cuba. Tapi kita tunggulah. Mungkin setahun dua akan datang, kita akan tengok sukan tu akan senyap begitu sajalah.
I mean, okay, so my last question would probably be when it comes to hosting this events or at least aktiviti kemasyarakatan, right, to have this love for keeping healthy, keeping active. Where can the ministry come into play here, especially encouraging the youth to advocate for their campaigns instead of it comes from the ministry and it becomes like a very, macam it's like a chore. It's like an activity. It's not necessarily a good. It's not intuitive in that sense. Yeah.
Kita kena go back to there are lots of things yang kita kena tengok balik lah, peranan yang perlu dimainkan. Bukan kita bercakap tentang Kementerian Belia dan Sukan, tapi kita juga perlu bercakap tentang peranan yang perlu dimainkan oleh Kementerian Pendidikan untuk pelajar sekolah dan juga Kementerian Pendidikan Tinggi untuk pelajar-pelajar yang ada di universiti. Sebab kalau kita tengok sukan ni terbahagi juga kepada sukan prestasi tinggi dan sukan sebagai satu, kita katakan untuk kita membabitkan dia sebagai satu bentuk rekreasi. Jadi perkara ni kita kena tengok juga. Kalau di peringkat sekolah, sukan ini tidak orang kata di peringkat sekolah rendah. Aktiviti sukan ni bukan satu sukan yang mesti dijalankan di sepanjang tahun. Jadi sukan ni di peringkat sekolah itu hanya dijalankan mungkin penggal pertama saja. Jadi kalau kita nak membangunkan seorang ahli sukan itu di peringkat sekolah, kita tahu dia punya limitation dia. Jadi kita akan berdepan dengan masalah dengan parents dan sebagainya. Di universiti pun macam tu juga. Kita pelajar menerima kemasukan universiti pada usia 18 tahun, 19 tahun, 20 tahun. Jadi kalau kita bercakap tentang sukan prestasi tinggi, siapa yang sepatutnya betul-betul membangunkan atlet supaya mereka itu kekal bersukan sampai mereka masuk ke universiti dan performance dia sudah berada di tahap yang begitu tinggi. Jadi benda-benda ni yang kita perlu tengok balik semula lah. Sebabnya sukan ni bukannya kita katakan membabitkan satu pihak saja. Dan sukan ini kita kena jadikan dia sebagai satu budaya yang bukanlah bila kita sakit ataupun kita tak sihat baru kita nak bersukan. Jadi ini yang kita perlu buat, kempen-kempen yang kita perlu jalankan sekarang lah. Bukan semata-mata kata bila kita bercakap sukan kita bercakap tentang atlet saja, tetapi kita bercakap tentang kehidupan dan yang satu lagi lifestyle. Dan satu lagi ialah kita juga perlu treat sukan ni, jangan sukan ini sebagai satu template saja. Bila perlu kita bercakap tentang sukan, tetapi sebenarnya sukan ini juga adalah penyumbang kepada sama seperti sektor-sektor lain, sektor ekonomi, sektor sosial dan sebagainya. Sebabnya kalau kita memberikan, kita katakan treatment kepada sukan ni macam tak ada pun tak apa. Jadi benda ni takkan, sukan kita tak akan pergi ke mana lah kan. Ini antara perkara yang kita perlu lihat lah.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much, Datuk Pekan. I think you've said it all. It's not necessarily just, it's not, basically sports is not necessarily just an event. You actually have to embed it in within your day-to-day and then see that as a value to push our, I suppose, citizens to be better and healthier nation, right? Quickly, when it comes to, Malaysians and at least the sporting events, right? I want to ask Srikan this as well. What sort of sports do you watch?
Oh, do I? Okay. Actually, I watch football. I like tennis, tennis and football.
Okay. Do you see like tennis or at least football being at the standards that you would probably enjoy here in Malaysia?
In my lifetime?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think it's good. I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of money is put into football and I don't think
you can't see the
result.
Impact of it. Yeah.
It's sad because we're too many football fans here. So
exactly.
Sad.
Datuk response to that macam mana?
So you tengoklah kita punya, if we are talking about our achievement in sport, kita masih lagi bergantung kepada beberapa sukan saja. Jadi kita tidak orang kata tidak dapat melahirkan betul-betul atlet yang ada potensi untuk memenangi pingat emas di sukan Olimpik sebab kita masih lagi bergantung kepada sukan seperti badminton, sukan seperti basikal. Tapi kita nak sebenarnya a pool of talent kita lebih banyak lagi. Tetapi sekarang kita lebih banyak spending our money dekat sukan-sukan yang tidak dapat produce a good result. That's why kita kena ubah kita punya pendekatan sekarang kan. Ada banyak perkara lagi yang perlu kita lihat lah.
Alright. I mean, I just wanted to understand from spectators' point of view as well, right? Anyway, now if you like this particular episode, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Don't forget to also turn on the notification bell if you haven't already. Now, if you do want to suggest future topics, you can comment, write to us. My name is Amalina Kamal, and on behalf of the show, I want to also thank our guest, Srikan Pillai. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Datuk Pekan Ramli, thank you so much. And we'll see you next week.